is Cherie Ray. I'm a consultant and coach to business leaders, teams, and individuals who want to eliminate struggle from their lives. As a result, clarity, ease, and beneficial solutions are realized. Let's connect for an exploratory conversation. Today, my very special guest is Gina Anastasi. Gina is the founder and president of Gina Anastasi Incorporated, which provides advisory and coaching services to executives and companies at all stages of development. She partners with senior management, entrepreneurs, and executives to maximize performance and profits through leadership and operational efficiency. Gina's most well-known company is Rent.com. Gina was COO through major restructuring and growth, increasing revenues from $2 million to $60 million. Rent.com became the #1 rental site in the United States and was acquired by eBay for $435 million. I'm delighted that Gina has joined this conversation to show what she's taught and experienced throughout the career in regards to leadership. Today's conversation focuses on what's needed most these days if you want to lead. This conversation is rich with information that will support you in taking your personal and professional lives to the next level. I hope you find this conversation helpful. If you know of someone who would benefit, please share this conversation, and I invite you to subscribe. Thank you very much for listening. Gina is hugely accomplished in what she does, and what I love about her is that there's so much heart in what she does, and I think in business, that is a very valuable component that's a game changer, and especially in leadership. So I got this idea to have this conversation with Gina because we were having conversations on just how fluctuating the world is and people's sense of well-being in the job market. Also, how many times people really want to up their game and they're not real sure how to up their game. And this is what Gina does at the highest level of CEO, chairman of the board, all that kind of good stuff. And we love the idea of having a conversation of how the qualities that are needed for that level of leadership, it's the same in your life, it's the same in business. And that for every human being, there's always an area where growth is possible. And we like the idea of demystifying it, that people at the top have it all or have it all in place. And that's what Gina specializes in, is helping even that level with whatever title on their card is to grow themselves. And so I'd love to hand the conversation off to Gina because she has a load of information she'd like to share. And then I'll have some questions and we'll go from there. So how does that sound, Gina?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, cool.
I'll just add a little bit to what Cherie said. I work usually with the company, so at all different levels. So from the senior level to sometimes first-time managers. And it always sort of is about the same thing. It's about how to be a leader, how to be a better leader, how to communicate. So the work that I've done in the past as COO of a number of companies that were growing or going through transformation, it always came down to that. How can the people you have, no matter who they are, up their level and prepare for change, prepare for growth, which can be very disruptive and scary for people. So, and it brings a lot of challenges. So how do you manage all that and keep everyone upping their level to the best of their ability? And one of the things that I wanted to say clearly too is that a leader isn't a title. It is you can be a leader in your family. You can be a leader with your neighbors, or on a committee. It's how you show up every day is kind of where you can demonstrate your ability to lead. One of the things Cherie and I were talking about when back, I guess it was been about a month ago now, was I was telling her about a book that I've used as a basis for a lot of the work that I do with my clients, because I found it so refreshing and so clear. And so, some of it was like, duh, of course, but it was supported by tremendous amounts of data and research. So the book is called Mastering Leadership, and it was by Robert, what are their names again? Robert Anderson and William Adams. And I will tell you, so I wanted to first check out who they were and were they legit. And between the two of them, they've had 60 years of leadership consulting, and they've done hundreds of thousands of assessments. So their book has a lot of data that's very rich and dense at times, but the premise that they discuss in the book is supported by all this data, and that's why they include it all. But having even checked them out, I will honestly say I don't like reading business books. I find them to be sometimes just more information, and they're not really transformational unless you take something and actually do something with it. So I got this book and I went to the last chapter. I said, let me just read the summary. Let's get to the heart of the matter, and then figure out if I even want to read any more of the book. Okay, the last chapter, I was in shock when I read it. Words like unity, consciousness, the unknowable, reference to Jesus, Buddha, Taoist philosophers, freedom, bliss, surrender, joy. And I'm going, whoa. And then they had a list of questions like, what are you attached to that if you let go would set you free? And I thought, okay, this is not a normal business book, but I like kind of the mindset. So I went to the introduction, which they also said, don't skip the introduction. And they basically said that what I just said earlier about leadership is how you show up every moment, whether it's an email, a phone call, a decision you make in a meeting, how you interview people. It's how you interact with them, even in the hallway, although none of us are doing hallway interactions anymore. So they stressed that point. So it's not just a title, for sure. And they said there are no quick fixes and there are no shortcuts to greatness. And they repeat those two things a gazillion times throughout the book. I actually had a client, potential client, who, when I sat down with him, he said, so Gina, just give me some tips and tricks, and then I'll be good and on my way. And I said, no, it doesn't work that way. So I said, I'm not going to coach you, because he wasn't really interested in anything transformational. He wanted just something quick and easy to do. And it just, leadership doesn't work that way. And he was having some challenges with some leadership, and I couldn't really help him with what he wanted. But anyway, so they also say that, so the thing the author said, and this is also so true, is leadership is, to be an effective leader, is a public and a private journey. It's public because you have to learn it out with other people and be out loud with it. So people are watching you and seeing you. You have to put yourself out there. And it's a private journey because it is truly an inner awareness that needs to be developed. And they said there are two factors that they determined after all their research that really were critical for effective leadership. The first is one that we're all familiar with, and that's like leadership competencies. Your skill, your knowledge, your ability to manage people, resources, time, that sort of thing, sort of the nuts and bolts. But they said the second factor that's really critical, that is almost never taught, never studied, never trained on, is what they call leadership consciousness. And leadership consciousness is your inner operating system. What drives you? What are your values, your beliefs, and the way you make decisions, like how you see the world. So the first one, that leadership competencies, is sort of that's the outer game of leadership. That's out there. The leadership consciousness, your awareness of how you show up in every situation, is what they call the inner game of leadership. And then they said, again, this is all in the introduction. They said that leadership is a game that is the inner game drives the outer game. So the inner game drives the outer game. And when we get stuck, it's because we're stuck in really the outer game and not really, we haven't paid enough attention to the inner game. So that's what will keep us back from growing as a leader and being more effective. They said that the most important thing to do to in order to develop that inner game, if you will, is to increase our awareness of and self-knowledge of who we are. And we kind of all have a sense of it, but they were really clear about three, they call them three core identities. You can call them energies, you could call them strengths. And we all have a bit of all of them, but we have a predominant one that tends to be on autopilot and tends to take over. And none of them are bad or good. It's just a kind of who we are. But it's when and each of them has a limitation. So there's strengths, and each one of them has a limitation also. And it's when we rely 100% on that strength, and we limit ourselves by not embracing the other two orientations. So I'll just go through them. You'll again, this is sort of like a duh, this makes sense too. One is the heart orientation. And that focus is relationship driven. So it is, you like to create harmony. You like people to be happy. You're very inclusive. You are loyal. So you are, and everyone kind of knows that. And I would probably venture to say there are probably a lot of women in that category also, not being good or bad, but that's probably true. It's kind of a big-hearted nature person. But the limitation is there that the heart-oriented person tends to give up too much power so that they are, so they don't get rejected. And so there's a fear of rejection, and there's just wanting to make everybody happy. So they don't really speak up as much, perhaps. The second one is orientation is called the intellectual orientation, or the head orientation. And these people leverage their smartness, and they can work really complex, difficult problems. They are rational, they're cool, they're like who you want in a crisis. But their limitation is they tend to just work from the neck up. So they communicate and work with people kind of from the neck up. So they don't develop the heart orientation as much. And part of that is because their fear is being vulnerable. So they stay in, up here in the neck and the head and that sort of thing. The third one is an orientation which they call achievement or will. And we all know people like this. These are people who just get stuff done. They will plow through no matter what it takes. They'll figure it out. They'll engage people. They'll bring people together. They're just real achievement oriented. Again, it's a great energy. You really want, when you think about it, if you're in an organization or a committee or anything, you want all these three energies. But the achievement orientation person, they tend to not delegate. They tend to usurp power from everybody else. So they tend to, and again, they're so afraid of failure. That's why they have to do it themselves. I think we all know people that probably have fit all of those. And again, none of them there isn't one that's right or wrong. It's just when we are so focused on the one that is predominant for us that we don't incorporate those other two. So the way to get to more effective leadership is to actually start incorporating those other two, the other two orientations that aren't as natural for us. And they said, again, in all their assessments, they said that there are five levels of leadership, the way they've defined them. 75% of all the people that they've tested, and I could say it's probably 75% of everyone in the business world, are in what they call the reactive stage. And the reactive stage tend to be driven by external external expectations, by safety, by moving up, by approval from others, right? The stage that is most effective, they have found, is what they call the creative stage. And this stage is driven by purpose, vision, contribution. And they tend to, their style is high engagement and collaboration. They're more interested in developing other leaders than anything else. Like that's their hallmark of this creative leadership. And when you think about organizations that have done really well, and we all probably have had some experience with the boss who didn't really develop and mentor people, and things start to fall through the cracks, and the company can't grow if you are actually not delegating and developing other people. It's very hard to grow if you're relying on any one person. In fact, even today, I was just talking to one of my clients, and there are two people involved in this company, and one of them has taken on. He's actually the person that's taken on so much work that the company, everything is bottlenecked with him, everything. And so it's very hard. And he's hired people that are not as experienced as they should be if you're going to grow and you want to delegate major decisions and responsibility to people. He has just decided to keep it all to himself, and it's creating a problem. So it's one of the things, literally the conversation this morning we were working on. And I also have another client who is clearly not a heart person, like he is, and he's not he gets a lot of stuff done, but he's also, his strength is in that middle one, the intellectual, rational person. He is brilliant, but he is aware that he is limited in his ability to run his company because he doesn't really possess that, especially that heart orientation, that relationship driven. He tends to shy away from that. He'd rather someone else do that, but he can't let someone else do that if you're the owner of the company. So that's one of the things I'm working on with him, is how to be more relationship driven. What does that look like? How do you communicate better? How do you make people feel by how you talk with them, and that sort of thing? So that's sort of the basic framework of the theory in this book that, again, has proven to me in every organization that I've dealt with, that these things are really self-evident and are really help drive a lot of the conversations. And they do have there are certain practices that you can do to become more, to get from the reactive stage to the creative stage. And it's really about being more aware of when you are stuck in your primary orientation, and think about, is there a way I could ask more questions to, is there a way that I can be calmer, more rational? If you're a heart person, it's probably like, okay, instead of saying yes, maybe I go out and I challenge people a little bit more. Maybe I'm willing to put myself, because remember what they said is, leadership is you have to be out there. It is not for the faint of heart. You have to actually put yourself out there and experiment and try some things in order to become the more creative leader, the more effective, which they have said is in everything that they've read, is a much more effective leader, especially as our businesses become and our lives become more complex. So that's sort of the basis of the conversation that Cherie and I had. And to me, when I read it, it was like, well, duh, why didn't I think of that? I mean, it was, it wasn't like, but the way they presented it was really clear, and it was backed up by tremendous amounts of research and data. So I felt really comfortable with kind of their presentation, and everyone that I've presented this book to has just loved it, because they just feel like it's given them a framework to work with.
Well, and Gina, one thing that you said that I think is so relevant to leadership is that there's no safe way to be great.
Yeah.
So I think growing that part of us that wants to always feel safe, but we also have this desire to go to the next level. And
Yes.
could you speak about, just navigating that, you know,
Yeah.
all that comes up when you feel like you're not safe, but you can't, if you don't move, you can't, if you don't move, you aren't going to move, I guess is one way of putting it.
Yes. So I had a client yesterday who said, I want to be better at my job. I want to be more successful, but I'm risk averse. So I keep waiting for them to tell me I'm doing a good job. And I go, what? I said, you gotta be out there. But he's so afraid to make a mistake that he stays stuck. And so, I've been in a lot of situations, especially with high growth companies that I've been involved with, and a number of them were tech companies. We didn't know we didn't, no one really knew exactly the best way to go about something. You just got to get out there and try it and experiment. And so being willing to experiment with how to approach a difficult situation or how to take a chance in a meeting. One of the things I've also seen when I've worked with large numbers of people inside an organization is, I sort of observed their meetings. A lot of times people, there's only a certain number of people that speak up. So, and I think we've all experienced that. So as a leader, by the way, I think it's imperative that you reach out and make sure you are calling on the people that are not speaking up, because they are sometimes, they just, for whatever reason, they're not doing it. You want to bring them into the conversation. But if you're one of those people who aren't speaking up, that's something you have to get used to doing. You have to get used to saying, excuse me. And I've actually been in meetings with all men where I had to say, hold on, you just interrupted me. I'm not through speaking. I'm not through saying something. And I'm telling you, the room got quiet because they all recognized it. They were being kind of rude. And so whether it's a bias, whatever it is, it doesn't make any difference. You just have to be sure that you're willing to step out of what's comfortable. And that was not comfortable for me. I was, these people were very, very high up and very senior, and I was kind of new to the company. And I said, no, this is not the way it's going to be. So it takes courage. It takes some courage to be willing to kind of put yourself out there a little bit, and not in a mean way or in a angry way. It's just like, excuse me, hold on, can I finish, please? It's very polite, very normal. So yeah, does that answer your question, Cherie?
It does, because I think in speaking to that part about the step one is to get over your own uncomfortableness,
Yes. Yeah.
and that's where the edge is, and then something will occur to you, but your own uncomfortableness is what's keeping you from, again, taking whatever step.
And what I have found is once someone has started that journey of stepping out and speaking up, they get more and more comfortable with it. And they get then they feel like more engaged with the organization. They feel, and guess what? They're also having tremendous impact because they did have something important to say. They did have something interesting to say. I know there's been some studies, and again, mainly women who tend to, the difference between men and women when they speak up, and men are willing to speak up, whether supposedly, I'm sorry, Michael, I don't mean this, it's not an anti-guy thing. This is just studies that have showed that men tend to be willing to speak up, even if they don't know all the answers or aren't 100% sure. And women tend to say, well, I want to be sure I have all the facts before I say something. I want to be sure that I'm right before I put my voice out there. And they found that this was a very common thing, difference between men and women. And so even knowing that, when I read that, I go, okay, I do that. I've done that. So now that I know that that's kind of I'm not alone in doing it, but it's actually holds me back. I'm going to step out of that, and I'm not going to wait till I know every answer. And maybe you say, look, I may not know exactly, especially if it's a topic you're not 100% sure about. that, I may not know all the intricacies, but what strikes me is X, Y, and Z. And you could be wrong, but who cares? Who cares? Let them say, no, no, that's not right. This is why. Okay, great. But at least you spoke up and you contributed in potentially a very positive way, an important way.
And I think that one piece, Gina, that I found so helpful that I wish I'd known a long time ago, that getting past that uncomfortableness is like, if you really boil it down, you're speaking to another human being.
Yes.
You're not speaking to the chairman of the board. You're not speaking to the person that signs your check or whatever you want to say. It's like if you can get past some of that, the mental bravado of who it is you're speaking to, and forget all that, and really drop in and realize that just you're speaking to another human being, your level of discomfort will drop tremendously.
Yes.
And people in those positions usually feel very refreshed that someone was, relaxed in a conversation with them to speak, not just contracted.
Yeah. I was in a meeting where one of the senior partners really kind of got on someone in a way that was over the top, and I ended up talking to her afterwards, and she's like a very valued member of this organization, and she was in tears. She was thinking she should quit or find another job. She was in tears, and of course he had no idea. So I called him, and again, this is a guy who does sign my checks, and I said, okay, so that meeting, you have to know the effect that it had on this person. And he was mortified. He was mortified. He goes, oh my God, I didn't realize it, because he gets in his head about something and he's like a dog on a bone and can't let go, but he's not aware of his audience, and his audience is someone that, especially, and it was around, other people were in the meeting too that were just shocked at the way he was kind of treating her, and he just was oblivious to it. So being able to tell the truth in a kind way, I told him, I said, look, this is sort of what happened and how she's feeling. The first thing he said was, what can I do to fix it? What can I do? How can I do it? And so good for him. And so I talked to him, and then I talked to her, and everyone's fine. But it was a pretty dramatic moment for him to, and I again, calling him on it in a very professional and nice way. Just, this was the reaction, and are you sure this is, what the way you wanted it to go down?
And yeah, and I know in both of our practices, we couldn't count how many times people have come to the conversation saying, I got to leave
Yeah,
because I was addressed this way, this way, this way.
yeah,
That happens all day long, every day, and people really believe that the only solution is leaving,
yes,
or it's usually that suck it up or quit thing is
yeah,
what usually happens, and
and
that's not
yeah.
it.
I'm sorry. And
At home too, I'll say it's the same thing. They think that that's the same dance is suck it up or quit, and it's like not at work or at home. That's the place where the role of leadership comes in.
yes, and this woman could have gone to him and and had a conversation with him similar to the one by sharing how she felt, but she was too intimidated. But she'd been there so long, she shouldn't have been. Instead of going, it's all or nothing. I'm either in or I'm out. It's like, and that's also something that I often coach people on too. It's and I've worked on this my whole life too, because I used to be pretty binary. It's black or white, or wrong or right, and stay or leave. And I finally got, okay, there's a lot of gray in that area. There's a lot of other choices. So being open to other choices, and asking questions and just exploring more, I think is important.
Yeah, and so how we had talked to too that there were like 7 practices of leadership,
Yes,
and I think that these are like key points that are the same practices of leadership in the universal sense,
yes,
no
yes,
matter where you are.
yes, absolutely. In the book, they talk, to get um, from the reactive stage and to start um, moving more towards this creative stage that's more effective. they said there are some things to practice. 6 things to practice, they say. So one is discerning your purpose. And by the way, if you, this book has tremendous suggestions and insights about all these things, but I'm just hitting the highlights. The second one is distilling your vision, being really clear in that, knowing your doubts and fears. So being able to speak to them, know what they are. This is part of your awareness of who you are and what drives you. Because the more you know about what drives you, the more you can catch yourself when you see it taking over, if you will. The next one is engaging in authentic and courageous dialogue. Again, similar to the examples that I just gave, being willing to speak up and ask questions, and again, you don't have to do it in a way that you're attacking someone. It's just asking questions and getting clarification. The next one is developing your intuition and being open to inspiration. So, one of the things I've been thinking about, like maybe a million other people, is should I move? Should I move somewhere? And so I feel like I've got one foot in and one foot out all the time. And I finally the other day said, okay, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But how about what can I do to make this place, this home better? What I'm going to use something that you shared once. What would make it better? Remember, Cherie? So what would make it better if I just stayed here? What would make living right here better? And yes, I still may move, but instead of living in the future, like really focusing on how do I make this work now? And I said the same thing to my client that I spoke to earlier today, who was thinking like, maybe I should leave because I'm waiting. He was one waiting for people to tell him he was doing a good job. And I said, well, what can you do to forget what they say? It doesn't do everything you can do to make it better today, right now, instead of thinking that there's some perfect job out there for you. I said, because I'm going to tell you, he said, I'm thinking maybe I should leave. And by the way, this would have been the 3rd job I've coached him in. And I said, there is no perfect job out there. You will encounter the same things no matter where you go, because you are bringing you to the job. So that's why the work has to begin inside, because it's the same issues you're going to bring to every single position that he goes to, the same things. So that's why the inner awareness and being clear and being willing to step out of the stories that we make up. That's the other thing that I see a lot. We make up these stories. I do too. We make up these stories in our head about the way things should be or the way we want them, and instead of looking at what is.
Or even making up that part about this is the way it has to be for me to be okay. That's so not true.
Yes, exactly.
And in that passive self-awareness, it's like seeing too that doubts and fears or all the whatever the stuff is that comes up. And I had a conversation with a client just this week. It's like, wait a minute, are you seeing that as true, or are you in the present moment seeing what's true in the moment? And too often we get oriented to the doubts and fears of what's true. This is life giving me feedback, and they're completely, like this particular situation. She lived with this on her mind, but she goes, gosh, it just dawned on me in the last 3 years, I've gotten nothing but favorable reviews. But she lived in the fear and doubt the whole time, which stopped her from taking on more responsibility. She saw that as true, not what was real and true and happening, that she'd gotten favorable reviews for 3 solid years.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's just a lot to, I think the other thing that most everyone I talk to, I don't know about you, Cherie, but everyone thinks they're kind of the only one who's suffering from whatever it is.
Yep.
So just acknowledging, no, it's everyone. And that's a lot of times I'll share stories about myself and what I've gone through, because everyone is the same. Everyone is, there may be different things, but by and large, everyone is dealing with stuff and doubts and fears. And by the way, even that person who is, the high energy and go get results done and is out there, very charismatic, they have doubts and fears too. They just maybe hide them a little bit differently, but they have them.
I say
Everybody.
I say they handle their discomfort differently. You
Yes.
know, their
Yes.
their lack of comfort does not stop them from, like you said, getting out of their own way, or
Yeah.
needing to feel safe. Is they're not waiting to feel safe to do something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
To elevate wherever you are today to where you want to be, it is not, there is, it's not possible to be safe. But safe is what? It's like, and maybe if that's okay with you, if safe is, then just be happy with that. Be happy with where you're at and the comfort level that you've got. But if for some reason you want more, and you have to be willing to, jump off the cliff a little bit. And I did that in my career even. And after I jumped off the first cliff and landed on my feet, I was able to do it the second time and the third time. So taking jobs, doing things I'd never done before, moving to a new place, like in a new industry, whatever it was like people were going, "What are you doing?" And I go, "It sounded interesting to me. So I think I can do it. If I don't, what's the worst that can happen? I'll figure it out." So, and that's exactly what happened. And there was one time when it was kind of the wrong move, but I always learned from it. Always learned something more about me and about what was important to me, whether it was a relationship that didn't work out or a job that didn't work out. I always got much more clarity about not only me, but how successful organizations work, and what's important to me in an organization. So
That's what I love, that idea that of really even redefining what safe is. It's like, what if you start the day knowing you're safe no matter what, versus this guy's got to be in that chair and this woman has to be at that table for me to be safe. It's like, oh my gosh, you're going to
yeah,
exhaust yourself the rest of your life and
yeah,
feel at the really at the effect of life instead of really leading your own life.
exactly, exactly.
I love that. Well, we're at that time where I'd love to open the floor if anybody has any questions. I have tons more questions to ask Gina, but if anybody has any questions about any situation, anything that regards to leadership, anything about even growing yourself to the next level, please raise your hand and I'll call on you.
I need some kind of challenge uh, to help boost me out of where I've been mostly in my own mind. And I moved to where I live now just in September. And I moved here for a purpose. And I know what that purpose is. And it's uh, years old. But for some reason, I just haven't hit it with the passion and fervor that I really feel. And I don't know what the hell I'm dragging ass about or waiting on, but I would like to bare my fangs and go after it with much more fervor.
So, Gina, what would you recommend? Like, if you feel like, and you've talked about it, about feeling like you're not making any forward movement from where you are to where you want to be, what would you speak to on that?
Well, sometimes the things we set out to do are big, or big in our minds, if you will, or maybe they are big. And one of the things that I do have to do for myself too is just take baby steps. So if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and almost create sort of a game plan for how to keep moving. And what's the first thing? What's the smallest thing you could do that could, related to the thing that is your passion, and maybe make a list what would be the next thing. So you have sort of you can sort of just take it slowly, and you don't have to have a time frame around it, but at some point it will probably either kick in, or you go, maybe this wasn't my thing. And that's okay too. I mean, that's sometimes like I bought a piano and I thought, oh, I'm gonna, I used to play piano when I was little, and I bought a piano, and yikes, I can count on one. No, actually, I have, in the beginning I played it, and I used to sing to myself, which is why I got it. I like to sing to myself, but I haven't touched it in probably 10 years. So, and I was looking at it the other day, go, you know what? Maybe I should do that again, maybe, and I opened it up and I go, yeah, no. So it just is gone. Whatever it was, what used to be something I loved doing is gone. And so it's like, okay, then let's find something else. So, but I think getting started and kind of keeping moving is important.
In that place of engaging. And
Yep.
I would say engaging in something, in the orientation of what that is. And, really start to play with the game of how could I look in this direction and cultivate a sense of discouragement proof, to get less attached to what my mind's making up my next result should be, or the next, what my mind makes up is a real indicator that I'm moving.
And I think that's really an important part, is being unattached to how it turns out, like whether it becomes the thing that you go for, or you pick something else, or you just say, hey, this was the wrong thing. And like just being unattached to that, because is critical, just as you said, because we build up all this expectation, and expectation is, yeah. As one of the coaches that, I don't know if you know, Steve Chandler, Cherie, but he always says expectations does nothing but build resentment and discouragement.
Oh, that is a good, I
Yeah.
would say that's a true statement.
It's better to make an agreement with yourself. Agree to like take some baby steps, see how it is, reevaluate, and agree that if it works, great. If it doesn't, fine. But, and same thing if you're having a conversation with a coworker and you're having to, you're having a problem with someone, figure out, come to an agreement with them, how to move forward, how to move past it. Not tell them what you expect them to do, but again, make agreements on how are we going to work this out? How's it going to go forward, so we don't have this problem again? Because then they have buy-in, and you have buy-in too if you're creating your own agreement with yourself.
Yeah, that buy-in is essential.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to move without the buy-in.
Right.
That's true. Anybody else have a question?
So I'm going through some leadership training now at our company, kind of for succession planning, and we've been doing lots of little mini courses. And two things that I've noted that I suck at, I'd like to hear your perspective on. One of them is empathy. It's hard to sit with a problem and not try to solve it or to try to help somebody. And I know that's really important, like being good at listening. And that's just not in business, but, at home too. Sometimes my wife just wants me to listen. She doesn't want my advice, and kind of tied to that also is taming my advice monster, being someone with a figure it out attitude and always trying to help things. Sometimes it's better to just listen, right? And get, and I just struggle with that. Like, I'll go into meetings with clients or whatever, and I'm already thinking about how I'm going to solve their problem, and they haven't even finished telling me what the problem is. And so I just be interested to hear your perspective on those two things.
Well, being COO of the companies I was involved with, I a lot of times people would come to me and I never solved their problems for them. I just asked them questions like, what would you do? And tell me, what do you think the three options are? And then let's talk about them, right? So I help them come up with their own solutions because they're closer to it in any case. So I would say, so they describe the problem. I'd say, okay, so given that, what do you think, what would be your top three options? And then, okay, which one would you pick? And I have to tell you that most of the time they pick the right thing, the thing that I would tell them to do. And maybe sometimes I would say, well, you know what, that's perfect. And maybe just tweak it. Maybe I'd tweak it just a little bit. And they go, oh, great. So this is what happens when you do that. You understand as a supervisor or a boss, if you will, how they think, how they're going to make decisions when you're not there. And you, as their supervisor and someone who's got a bigger vision of the company, you now have confidence that you have someone that you can trust can go make decisions. So what happens is then they stop coming to you for issues and trying to solve. So even if they're not coming to you, but your inclination to jump in and solve the problem for them, all that does is kind of make people feel not good enough. And so you can easily turn that around and say, tell me what you think you would do. That's an interesting problem. They say, oh yeah, that sounds good. You've just now created tremendous trust. You've created this sense of almost of collaboration also. And it's just easier. It takes all the burden off you instead of you feeling like you have to do it all. And I get it that it's sometimes easier if you just do it yourself. That's the reason a lot of people don't delegate and don't go through that process I just mentioned, because it is faster if you just do it or you just tell them to go do it. But you, again, the creative leader, the most effective leader, the number one thing that's their hallmark is that they're developing other leaders. So if your mission is not just to solve problems, but to always be developing other leaders, then it puts your mindset is different when you're encountering those issues. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. I think that's one thing I've been trying to catch myself. I just think a lot of times what I'll do is kind of answer, I'll get a call like, hey, I need to deal with something, and then I'll say, oh, here's my idea, and then what do you think? And I'm trying to get more at
reverse that.
What do you think, right? Yeah, exactly.
By the way, same thing at home, right? No one likes to be told what to do.
Right.
Nobody.
Yeah. No, and it's a little easier at home because my wife is not afraid to speak up to me. But that's helpful.
Yeah, you eliminate the friction at home.
Myself, I'm just kind of in it at work, just
I know.
And I'm not in that and I'm kind of transitioning now where I'm being asked more. The other thing where it looks a little harder, and I know it just looks this way, is dealing with clients about it too. Like for me, and I'm sorry I have kids at home making noise in the background. I apologize. But would you recommend that same situation with a client who's like, hey, I'm paying you to solve my problems. Don't ask me what I think. You tell me, because I've been in that situation. I've had people, where it's and even supervisors above me can be very sensitive to like, well, we want to be answering their questions. We don't want to be, asking them what they think, because that looks like we don't know what we're talking about. Does that make sense?
Sure. And certainly if a client's paying you to help solve their problems, and I don't know what business you're in, but by the way, even before you solve the problem, you want to be sure you are asking enough questions so you know what the issue is, and then coming up with you can come up with a couple solutions. Say, is there one that seems to make more sense to you? Because again, they may be closer to it. Again, I'm not sure exactly. Sometimes, if you're an accountant or something, maybe you do need to just tell them. But if you're, maybe it's more
engineering and consulting.
Okay. Well, so engineering is a pretty exact science. So maybe you do have to tell them. You definitely don't want to be asking them. But if you've got two great options, that you can certainly engage them in the conversation if you want.
I even think too, Gina, even in engaging them in the conversation a bit more helps you get more clear on what they feel their problem is.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So questions could just be an understanding more fully what they feel like they're up against and what they want you to solve.
Sometimes you're right, because sometimes what people say is their problem is just the superficial problem, and there's something actually deeper they're concerned about, or bigger that they're concerned about. So you just want to be sure you grasp all the information as much as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Yes.
Great.
as you were answering that which I brought up, one of the things you said was be unattached to how it all turns out. I'm dead certain that that is part of my problem, because I'm very attached, and I wanted you to elaborate on that. So, and the other thing is that Cherie and I have been working for some time on me not spending as much time in my head visualizing something that I want and being more in the present. And so, so I'm sure that my problem has something to do with having a fairly clear picture of something that I want, and as the end result. So you had said something about being unattached to how it all turns out.
So it doesn't mean that you're not passionate about what it is. But that you're willing to go through the journey to get to wherever it is, and sometimes we set up. I'll just say for me, for sure, sometimes I set up unrealistic expectations of the way something, when it's going to happen or exactly how it's going to happen, and which can tend to close off maybe other possibilities or other ways that even it could be better. So you just want to, when I say unattached, it just means being aware that even though you're focused on what you want to do, that it could have a slightly different outcome, and that could be okay too. Does that make sense? Cherie, is that right?
Well, yeah, and I'm thinking too, it's like where it tends to get sticky is if you attach whatever the outcome is to your level of a human being.
Yes.
You know, that it somehow it comes back to mean something about you.
Yes.
Good enough, that's when it gets sticky.
Yes. Yeah.
But when you start off knowing that you're a whole solid, you're the whole enchilada, you have nothing at stake.
You and I are going to work more on that right there, please. in the week ahead.
Great. Well, it's really true that we have everything. I like to always refer to it as like the acorn. We have it all. So it's like we have that intelligence in us, and it's like if I think that success of a project means something about my place on the planet, I think it's a big reason why people don't take the risk and take chances, because it's just too attached to how they feel about themselves.
That be the whole thing in a nutshell right there. But the one thing I know is that when I'm at my best, I feel very light and aggressive and ready to put the pen on the paper. There's no way to mess it up, etc. And when I'm not that way, then every little tiny thing seems like a big deal.
Well, we're 5 minutes to the end, so if we have time for one more question, and to see if anybody else has one more question.
I think, well, I'm not sure that this topic is really on point for me, and then I'm like 3 pages of notes into it. So thank you, Gina, and thank you, Cherie. But so how would you suggest this particular book to a leader in your life?
I'm sorry. So how to?
What would be a really unoffensive way to suggest this book title?
So how's this person related to you?
She's my employer. And she could greatly benefit from this book and from your time.
Well, it could be as easy as, I was in a webinar and I heard about this really interesting book that I really learned a lot from. And I think instead of making it be just about her, maybe be something you and maybe the whole company would, could benefit by reading. and even get her a book, I decided, I wanted to, you could say I bought a couple books for other people and just thought you might like it. If you don't, no problem, give it back to me. So you don't, so I don't know. That's probably how it's tricky. Like you have to be careful. I don't know. It depends too on your relationship with her but Cherie, do you have any suggestions?
I was kind of taking it lighthearted and say, let's start an office book club, Let's read it together and see what, because I'm hearing it's great. We could both learn from this. But could you state the name of the book again, Gina, and the authors, please? Because I'm getting requests for that.
Mastering Leadership, and the authors are Robert J. Anderson and William A. Adams. I always have to look at their names because they're so common. I always screw it up, their first names and last names.
No kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
So any other points that you'd like to cover, Gina, real quick before we sign off?
No, I think the only thing is maybe just to reiterate what I think I said in the beginning. I think I said it, maybe I didn't, but this inner game driving the outer game is the same in your personal life, in your business life, in your community life, and whatever. That is the way it works. And so the more we know ourselves and are willing to look at ourselves and willing to experiment, I call it kind of experiment with doing things a little differently and seeing if there's if you have a different outcome or how you feel about it. Like, keep experimenting. And it is a lifelong journey. That's the other thing they talk about. It is not one and done. It's ongoing. So, and the book, for those of you that end up getting the book, it's in the middle of the book, I would say there's a lot of information. It can get pretty dense in terms of the data, but the data is all there for you to if you for more for verification of what they've come up with. So it's really interesting.
I love that. I love that what you, even in our pre-talk where you just said there's no safe way to be great. It's like you have to do something different if you want something different.
Yes.
And that's as old as time.
Yes.
You cannot fight for where you are and expect the world to change to accommodate you. You got to do it different on your side of the line.
Transformation does not take place overnight, and it doesn't take place unless you are doing something different.
That's true. And you're participating. You must engage.
Yeah, you must engage.
Well, Gina, thank you so much for coming to the conversation. I just love everything that you offered. And Gina, you can always get in touch with her at ginaanastasi.com. And please take the spelling. I put it in the chat if you have it there. It's in the chat. And I thank you all for making time to come and share your thoughts and to listen. And especially you, Gina, thank you. It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much for listening to today's conversation on leadership. I hope you found information helpful to you in developing your own leadership skills, both personally and professionally.